So just wanted to continue our daily look at the financial markets. Again, just want to give credit to Gary V for his talk with a gentleman named Nipsey Hussle a couple of years ago, proposing somebody could drop music every day for 365, given all the technology of the day. So I'm like, hey, why can't I do that for the financial news? I'm already looking at it every day. Why don't I just look at it, take a bunch of notes, and share? So thanks Gary V. So today's an interesting day. There's a lot of businesses out there, trying to avoid the round of tariffs that go into effect tomorrow. I saw an article about the cargo ships in LA kind of backing up, right? Trying to get everything off today, the 31st before the tariffs go into effect tomorrow. But something I saw for the first time today, right? We've known, and I've said on this channel a couple of times, that tariffs are hitting manufacturing and business investment, right? And I think that was just as of yesterday. But today I got a number, which was interesting. Technology companies, or specifically electronic companies, have already been hit with $10 billion in tariffs. Now, it was unclear what happened there, right? Because that number could be calculated lots of different ways. So part of me wonders how much is absorbed by the company, how much has been passed on to the end buyer or someone else in the supply chain, or is it one of those numbers that talks about delayed purchases and things of that nature? Hey, I didn't buy something, and they're kind of grouping that all together. My guess is it's probably a little bit of all of that, right? I think some businesses had to eat part of that as cost or tax. I think some of them passed on the costs up the supply chain, which ultimately ends with the consumers, you and I. And I think it's such a big number that some of them are including, delayed or not purchased, right? Kind of goosing that number to scare everybody. So that's what I think happens. More tariffs go into effect, I guess it's tonight at midnight, on $112 billion of new stuff. That just sounds like a lot. So we'll see where this goes. It seems today, as of this morning, that it's these were planned. China knew about them, so no retaliation. I'm gonna say is hoped for. I don't know if expected is the right word with all the drama that's going around here, but hopefully this happens, moves on, and again we get back to negotiating, because as you'll see in a minute, we'll just go there now. For the first time, and I've been looking for this every day, consumers are worried about tariffs. Now, worried is an interesting term. It hasn't really translated to spending yet. But if you look at the Michigan's Consumer Sentiment Survey, it came in at 89.8 versus an expectation of 92.1. Now, again, don't get lost in these numbers. All these economists and different charts point at just things to confuse us, my opinion. But what you should take away from this is consumers are starting to talk about it. They're starting to think about it. The survey highlighted that 1 in 3 raised tariffs is a concern. And this is where it starts, right? Consumers' sentiment is probably where you're going to see the first uptick, because what will happen next is they will slam their credit cards shut, and then they'll stop buying, and then this consumer-based economy will grind to a halt, right? Because if the consumer joins the business in delaying purchases, which is what's happening now, there's no question we'll be in a recession. Right now, it hasn't happened, right? You can see a little trade down economy going, right? Walmart's doing better than Nordstrom's, for example. But it's interesting, right? And this is August data, so pretty recent, and it's pretty small sample size. It's 600 people, but again, it's the first thing I've seen where consumers are indicating that they are being impacted, or at least thinking about the tariffs, which should be concerning to anybody in politics. Because if the consumers revolt, um, it it'll be unstoppable until this is resolved. So again, economy that's 60 to 70% consumer driven. Our psychology is important, and it's why I look every day, because I'm looking for these. I'm looking for where everybody's at on the risk reward, greed versus fear spectrum. And it looks like we're inching towards fear, which is where I try to find when people go from greed to fear is an interesting transition. Next up, there's a couple of people when they write, I will read everything. The first is obviously Warren Buffett. I remember reading an unauthorized biography. I think I was in my early 20s, called The American Capitalist, I believe, about Warren Buffett. And this would have been in the 90s probably. So it's pretty old, right? It's a 20-year-old book, maybe 30 years old. Um, Still my favorite financial book, biography ever. I've read it 5 times probably. But the other one is a gentleman you may not have heard of. His name's Ray Dalio. He did just write a book, I think last year or the year before that, which I purchased. The name escapes me. I think I have it here somewhere. I can't find it right now. But anyways, he's another guy that I follow. Both Warren and Ray started from nothing, built their own businesses, and are wildly successful today. Warren's more out in front, goes on CNBC, all of that. Ray, from Bridgewater Associates, I believe is his company. Really didn't do that until recently, when he's really had a change of heart. He wanted to be below the radar. Now he's trying to get back. But anyway, so I follow Ray and Warren, is the point of that. But Ray talked about yesterday. He actually put it up on LinkedIn. CNBC picked it up. He is warning about serious problems kind of in the economy, and he's highlighting 3 things to watch. First is the ineffectiveness of central banks. Basically, the central banks, including the Fed, right? He's talking about all central banks, right? The world, right? The fact that they're having to go in some economies to negative interest rates to goose spending / investments, he says a red flag. The high levels of debt, including $1 trillion, miss or whatever you call it in the U.S. deficit in the U.S. concerning, right? Basically, you have to monetize this debt, keep interest rates low to pay for it, and he says that's going to create imbalances in the system. And then he throws on top of that the U.S.-China conflict. Conflict's an interesting word, right? It's always called a trade war. He calls it a conflict. I'm not sure why. But basically, you throw that in, which could lead to protectionism, and you could very quickly be in depression environment. He actually recommends researching the period of 1935 to 1945 to see what happened, which I'm going to try to do. I'm going to try to look it up and see what's out there. Again, I read everything that Ray puts out as well as Warren. And so I need to go figure out what happened between 1935 to 1945. He is talking about a paradigm shift where investors just have too much risk. He has said that there could be movement towards gold in this, which I think is interesting. I have owned a little bit of gold here and there. It doesn't produce income. It looks shiny, but it just sits there. So it's not something that I recommend, right? It's a hard asset. You have to insure it. You have to just put it somewhere, right? Holding costs. It's just not a great use of capital, in my opinion. If you want to have some because it makes you feel better, great. But it's not something I would put significant percentages of my wealth in. But again, it's what he's talking about, right? Obviously, the hard assets I like are real estate because it's inflation protected, it has income and tax advantages and conservatively financed. You know the drill. So I think there's a better option, but again, this is his opinion. And then the last thing I always look at is you got to take all of this with a grain of salt. He does run the largest hedge funds out there. And his 2 largest ones are down for the year, which, if you know Ray's story, doesn't happen a lot. I think I remember in his book he said 3 down years or something. So it doesn't happen a lot, but this could be number 4. The largest one is down 6%, and his second largest is down 9%. So part of me goes, okay, is this just somebody upset with their models and wants to put it out there to see if he can change it? He's still got 4 months left in the year. I don't know. I don't think that's who Ray is by any stretch, but anytime I read something like that and it's kind of a countermeasure to what's going on, I wonder what's happening. So that's interesting. And then the last thing that caught my attention is the California governor signed basically agreed to a deal. I think the apartment association is also agreed to cap rent rises or rent increases to 5% plus inflation with a max of 10% a year. I'm on record of saying that's not addressing the problem. You have actually hurt my tenants because you're, as a landlord, you're telling me I have to raise rent every year or I lose it. Uh, in the past, I would, um, a tenant that paid rent as expected, I could give the next year without raising rents. But now you're telling me I raise rents or I lose it forever. So we're going to have to raise rents every year. Again, these are legislators who I am guessing don't own a bunch of rentals, not realizing what's really happening. Yes, we have some horrible individuals who take advantage of people and they should be punished. That's not everyone. In fact, that's not even most landlords. But again, if you want to attack the problem and you want to pander to the voting base and all of that, increase your chances of election, I get it, I guess. You're not fixing the problem. Our problem in California is we don't have enough affordable housing. We need approximately 180,000 units a year created, and because of our legislation and the rules and costs and all these things, we've been building about 80,000 for the last decade. Fix that problem, right? That's the problem. Help us create transportation that can get somebody um, to the Silicon Valley or LA, where the jobs are, under an hour, right? Like high speed trains, right? Something like that. We have lots of land in California. There are plenty of places to build. You just can't get there to the employment base quickly. Fix that problem. But if you want to pander to the base and, say you're being hard on landlords and all of that, I get it. So that's what I'm thinking today. So at the end, just another Saturday. It's a long weekend. I hope you enjoy it. Again, let's see what happens on the trade war front. More tariffs go into effect later today. Got to follow Ray Dalio. If you don't know who he is, check him out. Consumer sentiment is showing the first signs of being impacted by the tariffs. And then finally, the California legislation is putting some rent caps in place, but not addressing the problem. All right, take care. Have a great day.